Irminsul is gone. The literal database of Teyvat's entire world is destroyed. But the story of Genshin is definitely not over. No. In fact, far from it. Because before Irminsul was destroyed, Nahida uncovered a secret about a hidden statue of the Seven, one that we probably haven't seen before. Dottore left behind important information that might explain how he could one day return. And throughout these quests, a suspicious lizard keeps appearing in very particular scenes. So this video will be a lore recap of Acts 9 and 10 of the Song of the Welkin Moon Archon quests. And in the second half, we're going to cover theories and analysis. Act 9 starts with the Traveler and Paimon receiving a letter from Kale. Kale explains that she had a very strange dream. She was in Sumeru City, but everyone's lives were flip-flopped. Kaveh was Dori, Dori was Kaveh, Sethos was Tainari, Tainari was Sino, etc. When Kale finally finds Tainari in the dream, even he doesn't recognize her. Completely overwhelmed, Kale breaks down and suddenly wakes up back in reality. At first it seems like it could have been a nightmare, but then Kale hears a voice telling her to report it to Nahida and the Traveler, and warns her that a storm is coming from beyond the bounds of fate. This voice, as you might have recognized, happens to be Nicole's. Kale's dream, where people's memories and identities have been rewritten, immediately raises questions about Irminsul, because Irminsul is the database of Teyvat's memories and the information carried through the ley lines. Kale may have just seen an early warning of what could soon happen in reality. Nahida takes the warning seriously. By the time the Traveler and Paimon arrive, Sumeru City and large areas of the rainforest are already being evacuated. At the sanctuary of Suristana, the Traveler learns that Irminsul is malfunctioning from the inside. Usually the ley lines carry information into Irminsul where it's recorded and stored properly. But now something has gone wrong inside Irminsul. Information is piling up faster than it can be processed, disrupting the flow of the ley lines. If this continues, the dead might not be able to properly return through the ley lines, while the living may begin losing their sense of reality. Nahida tries to solve the problem herself, and because she is directly connected to Irminsul, she attempts to take over its processing function and keep the system running. But the strain is too much for her and she loses consciousness. The group decides to move her away from Sumeru City. The entrance to Irminsul is beneath the sanctuary of Suristana, so they hope that increasing the distance between Nahida and Irminsul will reduce the damage being done to her. They bring her to Caravan Ribat, where everyone now has to decide what to do while their Archon is unconscious and Irminsul is getting worse. Apparently this disaster is starting to affect people in real life. Some civilians secretly try to return towards Sumeru City and are later found near Yasma Monument, suffering from severe mental distress and attacking each other. Most of them apparently die. While investigating strange leyline blossoms, Sino and the others realize that Irminsul has not completely rejected outside access, meaning it might still be possible to connect to it. The problem is that Nahida is unconscious and no ordinary person can connect to Irminsul without a system designed to do so, which brings them back to the Akasha. In the previous Sumeru Archon quest, we learned that during the Cataclysm, forbidden knowledge began corrupting Irminsul. So the previous Dendro Archon, Greater Lord Drukadevata, created the Akasha to gather the wisdom of Sumeru's people and fight back against the contamination. Even though the Akasha has been shut down, its infrastructure still exists. So if they can restore it, the Akasha terminals may give the people of Sumeru a way to connect to Irminsul again. The problem is that the Akasha relied on the Dendronosis for power, and the Dendronosis is no longer in Sumeru since Nahida traded it to Dottore for information about the false sky, and he later delivered it to the Tsaritsa. So this is the plan presented in Act 9. They need to first protect and evacuate Sumeru's people. Then they need to stabilize Nahida. Then they need to find a replacement power source for the Akasha, because the Akasha might be their only way to access Irminsul and repair it.
We interrupt this lore spiral to bring you news from today's sponsor.
Today's video is sponsored by Aniva. Aniva makes topping up your favorite games ridiculously easy, and yes, they've got all the Hoyoverse titles including Genshin Impact. Here's how it works. Just search Genshin Impact on Aniva's top-up page, choose a server you play on, and enter your UID. And boom, that's it. No login and no password required. It's quick, simple, and you still get your top-up delivered instantly. And the best part? Aniva's cashback system. You can get money back from your top-up. For example, if I buy this Primogem pack, I can go to orders and hit claim, and cashback will be added to your account. Then that balance just sits there ready to use on your next top-up for you to use on future pulls. If you play Genshin in Japan, the prices there are currently the best. If you want to use Aniba for your Columbina and future nod-krai pulls, use a link in the description and pinned comment down below. Thank you once again, Aniba, for sponsoring today's video. So, the plan is to protect the people, stabilize Nahida, and find a power source for Akasha to work again. The group splits up according to those goals. Principles. The Eremites escort civilians towards Aru village. The scholars investigate the Temple of Silence because King Deshret's ancient civilization may have left behind technology powerful enough to replace the Gnosis. Meanwhile, the Traveler and Paimon take Nahida to Apep. Times are dire, and Dendro Dragon Sovereign Apep might be the only being in Sumeru who can help Nahida recover while Irminsul itself is failing. Given the history between humans and dragons, Apep doesn't immediately want to help. She doesn't care about humans at all, so she feels she has no reason to solve Sumeru's problems. But the Traveler reminds her that Nahida previously saved her from forbidden knowledge during Nahida's second story quest. Apep at least agrees to repay that help. Through the Heart of Oasis, she gives some of her life force to Nahida. This stabilizes Nahida enough for her to survive, but Apep warns that it is only temporary. Nahida can't truly recover unless Irminsul itself is fixed. Apep then reveals a lore drop about Irminsul. Irminsul was not created by the Heavenly Principles, which is opposite from what we previously thought. According to Apep, Irminsul existed before the Heavenly Principles arrived. Apparently, it originally belonged to the old world of Teyvat and the dragons, and it once filled with the power of the Light Realm. After the Heavenly Principles took control of Teyvat, they changed Irminsul so it would serve humanity and anchor the fate of the world. After Apep helps her, Nahida briefly wakes up. She gives the Traveler a message involving a special statue of the Seven. The location connected to the message is hidden, and Nahida tells the Traveler not to tell anyone. So the Traveler keeps that information to themselves for now, and we actually don't get a follow-up for the rest of the quests. But don't forget about it, because we will come back to this mystery in the theory section towards the end of the video. Across the desert, countless jinn begin creating massive sandstorms. These storms block the route to the Temple of Silence, which means the scholars can't continue searching for the technology needed to restore the Akasha. El-Haytham suspects a disturbance began in Gurabad, where dormant jinn were believed to be sealed beneath the ruins. The Traveler realizes that Lilupar, a powerful genie from the Golden Slumber World quest, may be able to stop them. The Traveler and Paimon go into Gurabad and find that the Fatui are already there. They also meet a masked man who is later revealed to be Pantalone, the ninth of the Fatui Harbingers. He confirms that Dottore did die in nod-krai, but he also says that Dottore's death did not bring everything to an end, meaning Dottore could be behind everything happening to Irminsul. Pantalone questions whether the world ruled by the Heavenly Principles and the Seven is actually just. He talks about how he and Dottore were both rejected by this world and wanted to create something different. But his main goal in this scene isn't to persuade the Traveler, but rather to distract them. When the Traveler tries to chase him, Pantalone traps them. At the same time, the Jinn continue attacking the desert. The Fatui use them to create the sandstorms and keep everyone focused on the desert while their real plan involving Irminsul moved forward. At Aru village, Tainari, Kale, and Dori are protecting the evacuated civilians from the Jinn. Their defenses start failing, and Kale hears Nicole's voice again. Nicole tells her to repeat a song. When Kale repeats it, the Jinn immediately calm down and even show submission. Apparently, this song was written by the goddess of flowers, Nabu Malikata. This moment brings us back to the darkest part of Kale's lore, and her connection to god remains. When Kale was a child, she was extremely sick with Elazar. Her parents were desperate to save her, and they were manipulated by a seer who claimed she had been touched by supernatural creatures and needed to be given to him in order to survive. In reality, the seer was working with Dottore. Kale was taken by the Fatui and used as a test subject in experiments involving god remains. In this quest, we learned that the remains injected inside Kale came from the goddess of flowers. Nabu Malikata was one of Sumeru's 3 ancient god kings, alongside King Deshret and the previous Dendro Archon Greater Lord Drukadevata. She was also an angel like Nicole. Because a small fragment of Nabu Malikata had remained inside Kale, a trace of the goddess of flowers' power was still living through her. That fragment sent Kale the dream that warned Sumeru, and when she recited Nabu Malikata's song, its power manifested again, calming the Jinn. But Kale doesn't see this as a special gift. These powers came from something that Dottore forced into her body when she was young. Even though now those remains help save people, Kale is afraid that they may still affect who she is or what she could become. Back in Gurabad, the Traveler and Paimon are rescued by Jet and Ben, who are also from the Golden Slumber World quests. I really enjoyed this World Quest series, so it was really nice to see them again. Jet originally met the Traveler while exploring the desert with her father Jebriel. During those quests, Jebriel sacrificed himself to save her and became trapped in the Golden Slumber. Later, Jet joined the Tanit in the hope of finding a place to belong, only to be manipulated and betrayed by Babel. By the time she appears here again, she has become an independent mercenary leader. Jet Jet helps a traveler find Lilupar, and Lilupar says stopping the Jinn from stirring the sandstorms is simple for her, so she calms the Jinn and clears the storms. The traveler Paimon, Jet, and Lilupar then reunite with everyone at the Temple of Silence. At this point, the scholars need an actual replacement for the missing Dendronosis. Nahida is only temporarily stabilized and Irminsul is still deteriorating. The possible solution is Aru. Sethos explains that Aru was one of King Deshret's greatest creations, hidden deep inside his mausoleum and built through the work of both divine and human artisans. But Aru wasn't originally created to repair Irminsul or power the Akasha. Aru was created as an artificial afterlife for the people of the desert. Through the golden slumber, souls could remain inside an eternal dream instead of returning through the normal cycle of the ley lines. This is the same place Jebriel was trapped in after sacrificing himself to save Jet. King Deshret wanted to create a protected paradise for his people, separate from the suffering of the world and the rule of the gods. However, Aru was never fully completed. Now the group wants to open it up and modify its technology so it can be used against the Irminsul crisis. Nicole and Nefer arrive from nod-krai around this time, but they reveal another serious problem. An invisible barrier has appeared around Sumeru's borders, and they were nearly unable to enter the nation. Nicole believes it's Irminsul's own defense mechanism, attempting to seal Sumeru off so the disaster doesn't spread through the rest of Teyvat. I'm actually really impressed that Irminsul comes with this kind of defense mechanism. The group enters the mausoleum of King Deshret and finds a mechanism connected to Aru. There they find 3 gods who once served King Deshret: Thoth the Ibis King, Harishaf the Goat King, and Sobek the Crocodile King. All 3 had been imprisoned inside Aru, and the only way to free them was to answer 3 questions left behind by King Deshret. Nefer realizes the answer to all 3 questions is time. Time causes civilizations to rise and fall, time allows feelings and grudges to disappear, and time determines what is remembered as true and what is eventually lost. Istaroth intensifies. Thoth accepts that this was the answer King Deshret was looking for. He also suggests that Aru may have been connected to King Deshret's desire to reverse time or return the world to an earlier state. Interesting. But before Sumeru can use Aru, there is one final requirement. The 7 pillars must unanimously agree to open and modify it. Apep is included among them, and because she is already supporting Nahida, her consent is also accounted for. They all agree, but opening Aru comes with a cost. The souls inside the golden slumber will be released back into the ley lines. If the ley lines return to normal, those souls will then be received by Irminsul. In other words, King Deshret's artificial afterlife will end permanently. When Aru opens, Jebriel's soul appears before Jet. He tells her that he's finally free, and now Jet is able to say goodbye to her father knowing that he's no longer trapped inside the golden slumber. With Aru opened, Act 9 ends with Sumeru finally having a possible replacement power source for the Akasha. Or so we thought. Act 10 begins with scholars arriving at the mausoleum of King Deshret to examine and modify Aru. Kava and Alhaitham lead the work, assisted by the academia. An important detail is that some of Aru's components have to be operated by humans. A little bit of backstory. King Deshret involved mortal artisans in its creation because he believed humans should have a role in shaping their own future. Nahida returns after Apep shares her life force with her, and she's stable enough to act again, but not yet fully recovered. Sorush from the Caverna of Good and Evil World quests, which mentions Dainsleif by the way, and several Aranara also appear to support her. Because the emergency now affects everyone in Sumeru, Nahida allows the Aranara to reveal themselves to humans while the crisis continues. Then, Nahida explains how the Tore entered Irminsul. After nod-krai, Nahida had been monitoring the pathways someone might use to invade Irminsul. But the Tore chose the one route she could not safely block. He entered Irminsul through death. Remember, when someone dies in Teyvat, their soul returns to the ley lines. Nahida can't stop a soul from entering the ley lines, even if it happens to be the Tore. So he died in nod-krai and his soul traveled into Irminsul, because that's what should happen to everyone when they die in Teyvat. Once he entered, Irminsul began blocking Nahida's access. His corruption spread and a massive dark tree began appearing above Sumeru City. So this is where the original plan from Act 9 needs to change. At first, the scholars planned to use Aru as an alternative power source for the Akasha. They would restart or modify the Akasha, use the terminals to connect to Irminsul, and then attempt to repair the problem. Nahida explains that this will not work anymore. Irminsul itself is now too damaged. damaged and the Torii is already inside it. Reconnecting through the Akasha won't help them fix anything. So they create a new plan. They will connect Aru to the Akasha, distribute new Akasha terminals across Sumeru, and have everyone connect to Irminsul at the same time. Since the Torii is already placing enormous pressure on Irminsul from the inside, adding the connections of Sumeru's population all at once should overload the system and force it to shut down. That shutdown will stop the corrupted tree from continuing to grow and temporarily limit the Torii's control. Then while the system is stopped, Nahida will use the pyronosis to burn the corrupted Irminsul. Kaveh and Alhaitham modify Aru and merge its functions with the Akasha infrastructure. The group manufactures new terminals and distributes them to people throughout Sumeru. Every person wearing the Akasha terminal will connect to Irminsul at the same time and add enough strain to force the corrupted Irminsul to essentially crash. Now on to the next phase of the plan. Aru is also used for a second purpose. The Torii is inside Irminsul, meaning he can track information being recorded through it. He can see anyone at any time. However, Aru has an interference shield, and the group expands this shield through the Akasha terminals. This prevents the Torii from accurately locating or tracking everyone connected to the Akasha. So now they're able to hide Sumeru's people from the Tore long enough for the counterattack to begin. Meanwhile, Nahida secretly contacts Mawika and asks for the pyronosis. The Torii can't easily detect this meeting for two reasons. The travelers are the sender and isn't recorded by Irminsul. Mawika's information is preserved through Natlan's Night Kingdom rather than the normal ley lines. Nahida needs the pyronosis because it can greatly amplify elemental energy. And you're gonna need a lot to burn this tree. Since Irminsul can no longer be repaired normally, she needs enough power to destroy the corrupted tree completely. Mawika agrees to give her the gnosis. Once Irminsul is overloaded and the Torii can no longer track anyone, Sumeru launches an attack on the city. Cyno, Candace, Dea, Tainari, and the others fight to reclaim Sumeru City, while the Traveler and Wanderer enter Irminsul itself. Once inside, they find Irminsul severely damaged and corrupted. Eventually, the Dode finds them and surprisingly addresses Wanderer as Scaramouche, which is huge because Wanderer erases past identity from Irminsul. Most, if not the whole world, shouldn't remember Scaramouche. However, the Torii explains that after meeting Wanderer again in Nod-krai, he was able to deduce what had happened. During the battle, Wanderer keeps the Torii occupied while the Traveler reaches the part of the system Nahida needs. This creates an opening for Nahida to take control of the corrupted information inside Irminsul. Nahida then makes the most important choice in the quest. She decides to destroy Irminsul. Irminsul is deeply tied to Nahida's own existence. She was created from one of its purest branches to save it from corruption. It also, again, holds the knowledge and memories of the entire world and serves as a system through which fate itself is maintained. So destroying it is a huge deal. In fact, when Nahida decides to burn the tree down, Teyvat's higher powers respond. Renova, the ruler of death, Istaroth, the ruler of time, and Nibirius, the ruler of life. The shades that directly report to the Heavenly Principle showed up because of this. The shades question Nahida's decision to burn Irminsul, but Nahida refuses to save it. Irminsul has been corrupted beyond redemption, and she believes that honoring the tree means protecting the humanity it was meant to serve, even if Irminsul itself must be destroyed. Nibirius accepts her decision. She tells Nahida that she has already become a great tree in her own right, so there's no reason to fear the loss of another. The shades allow Nahida to proceed, so then she uses the pyronosis to burn Irminsul. As it burns, the Tore accepts that his experiment has reached its end. He says goodbye to his husband, Pantalone, but is he actually dead? Could he ever come back? After the crisis, the people of Sumeru begin returning home. Dea and Candace talk about helping Aru village recover, while Sethos prepares to return to the Temple of Silence. Thoth and Harishaf decide that they may remain in the modern world rather than disappearing back into the past. Nahida welcomes them and says the temple is an appropriate place for King Deshret's former servants to continue living alongside humanity. Kale then officially graduates from trainee status and becomes a full forest ranger. Act 9 began with her fear of losing her identity with the god remains inside her, but becoming a forest ranger is something Kale earns through her own efforts. In a heartwarming epilogue, she's recognized for the person she's become and moves on from her traumatic childhood. Later, the Traveler and Paimon visit Nahida and Wanderer at the sanctuary of Surasthana. Nahida explains what happened after Irminsul burned. The flames continued for 7 days and 7 nights. Remember this detail for later. Most of Irminsul was destroyed, although underground remnants remain. Aru now carries the responsibilities Irminsul once handled, preserving the essential information the world needs to remain stable. Because a disaster was stopped in time, most of Teyvat's vital information was preserved. So Aru is kind of the replacement for Irminsul now. Nicole also saved Nahida. Since Nahida's existence had been connected to Irminsul, destroying the tree could have destroyed her as well. Nicole severed Nahida's old connection to Irminsul and transferred it to Aru instead. So the basic outcome is this. Irminsul is no longer Teyvat's active database system. Aru has essentially replaced it. Nahida survived because her connection was moved from Irminsul to Aru. Sumeru then receives a letter from Pulcinella, the fifth Fatui Harbinger. The letter claims that the Tore had already been censured after the unrest in Nod-krai, and that his actions didn't represent the official intentions of Zapol Yarny Palace. Snezhnaya also lost a Harbinger during this crisis, and the Tore's remaining subordinates will be punished. Snezhnaya also promises relief funds and supplies for Sumeru's recovery. Paimon immediately realizes how convenient that statement is. It basically allows the rest of the Fatui to avoid direct responsibility. Nahida understands the political wording as well, but she accepts that the immediate issue of the Tore is settled for now. Nahida travels to Natlan with the Traveler and Paimon to thank Moika. During their conversation, Nahida reveals that they searched the remains of Irminsul and found no trace of the pyronosis. It just suddenly disappeared. I'm going to make a guess and say that Pantalone took it with him back to Snezhnaya. Not confirmed, just a guess. Even so, Moika doesn't regret giving it to Sumeru. She suggests that its disappearance may be connected to the large change Irminsul's destruction caused to fate. Like Pantalone took fate in his own hands, literally, and took the Gnosis, yes. The final part or epilogue of the quest focuses on Kale. Kale travels to Mondstadt with the Traveler, Paimon, Tainari, and Sino. She reunites with Sucrose and Albedo and the cast from the Windbloom Festival. Nicole then reveals that Lilupar has come to see Kale. Lilupar explains that the final remaining trace of her mistress, the Goddess of Flowers, now exists inside Kale. She's apparently waited centuries for the chance to be close to Nabu Malikata again. Kale explains that she no longer wants anything from the god remains inside her. The remains already gave her the dream that helped save Sumeru, and she doesn't want divine power or a special destiny. She just wants to live as an ordinary human being. Lilupar asks Kale to let her take the remaining essence of the Goddess of Flowers from her body. This would finally remove what the Fatui forced into Kale when she was a child and allow her to live without any god remains inside her. But Lilupar also admits that doing this will cause her own death. She's tired after living for so long and wants to rest with the final trace of the mistress she loved. Kale agrees. Lilupar takes the remaining trace of Nabu Malikata from Kale and disappears with it. That concludes the main events of Acts 9 and 10. But the quest leaves behind some very important information about the Tore, fate, and what this could mean for Snezhnaya. Not to mention the cryptic message Nahida gave the Traveler while she was still connected to Irminsul. But is the Tore actually dead? There may have been some confusion surrounding the Tore's plan and what happened to his soul after he split it in half. But the post-quest item Anomalous Tree Marrow 3 explains the method behind his plan. The Tore's notes say that he split his soul into two halves. One half would enter the ley lines after he died in nod-krai. The other half would be injected into Irminsul by Pantalone as data. Both halves would then travel to Irminsul and merge there, or become one again, allowing his memories and consciousness to remain intact inside the tree. I think it's the calm side degree in me, but Pantalone uploading the Tore into Irminsul sounds like a very literal SQL injection. And I don't know, I just find that kind of funny. Their last exchange also makes their relationship really interesting. Now, I don't ship anything in Genshin other than myself and Minsleif, but their chemistry was really good. And they also use each other's real names before the Tore is about to disappear. That's so romantic. Anyways, so is the Tore really, actually, completely dead? The Tore we know is gone. However, Act 10 introduces a possible loophole which Anomalous Tree Marrow 3 helps support. The Tore asks what would happen if, after his own soul was depleted, his data were extracted from someone else's, possibly Pantalone's memories, and combined with that person's intact soul as the base material. Pantalone responds that this would mean creating a new individual, and questions who could even perform that experiment once the Tore was gone. Remember Guthred in Act 5 of the Natlan Archon quests? When the traveler encounters Guthred in the Night Kingdom, the group is confused because Guthred was from Conria, and the Night Kingdom originally didn't accept souls from outside Natlan. Guthred explains that he's not actually the original Guthred soul. He is more accurately a story created by the people of Natlan after shamans recorded his deeds on a woven scroll. What they're seeing is the version of him preserved through story and people's memories. Most importantly, this reconstructed Guthred is imperfect. He was remembered as a glorious hero, but he admits the real Guthred was far more obsessive and cruel. But the difference is that Guthred was created from the memories within the Night Kingdom and not the ley lines. And Dottore is suggesting something much more disturbing, taking someone's memories and combining it with another person's soul to create an entirely new version of him. It's not impossible, I suppose, but there may be another way for Dottore to return, or at least for a new version of him to live on. Because throughout the Archon quest, there's one incredibly suspicious detail. This little blue lizard keeps showing up for apparently no reason. It first appears in the Curatorium of Secrets. Then it appears near Thoth at Aru. And in Act 10, it appears again during the scene where Mawika gives the traveler in the heat of the pyronosis. And maybe I'm reading way too much into this little guy, but the way these scenes were framed makes it feel like the game wanted us to notice this. Now here's the issue. Dottore had already been experimenting with something related to this. Back in Act 7 of the nod-krai Archon quest, Albedo and Wanderer discover human bodies lying beside animals. They eventually realize that Dottore had transferred the human minds into those animal bodies as part of his experiments. Then Anomalous Tree Marrow 3 explains why those experiments mattered. Dottore says that splitting the soul wasn't the hardest part. The real problem was figuring out how to transfer that soul to the correct destination. So he began testing that process on animals, using other people's souls as his subjects. So the idea of putting a human soul or consciousness into an animal body is something Dottore had actively tested. And after everything he says about preserving himself, it's hard not to wonder whether that lizard is more than just a little detail. It makes you wonder if Dottore is actually this little lizard. But there's one more detail that might make this theory even stronger. After Irminsul is destroyed, Nahida says that the pyronosis burned the corrupted tree for 7 days and 7 nights before the flames finally died down. That wording felt very specific to me, so I went looking for whether it could be referencing something. And I found a possible connection in the Midrash Tanhuma, an ancient Jewish commentary on the Torah. It's not part of the Bible itself, but a later collection of rabbinic interpretations and stories that expand on biblical ideas. In one passage, Vayeshev 3:4, a furnace burns for 7 days and 7 nights. When the fire becomes hot enough, a creature that looks like a lizard emerges from the flames. This passage actually connects back to the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the 3 men who survived being thrown into a fiery furnace in the book of Daniel. The Midrash uses them as an example of people surviving fire, then brings up the salamander. Because it was created from fire, it was believed to be protected from it, meaning the possibility that Dottore actually lied and split his soul into 3. One died in nod-krai, the second was kept in Northland Bank by Pantalone, and the third is now in this lizard. So is the last piece of Dottore's soul in this little lizard? To be clear, none of this is confirmed, but I also don't think it's unreasonable to question whether Dottore is truly gone. Either that, or I'm coping with the rest of the Dottore fans. Because honestly, I thought he was one of the best villains Genshin has ever had. Maybe even the best. And I love the idea that even after his defeat, the threat of Dottore is still hiding somewhere in the story, waiting for the right moment to return. I just love the thought of him continuously haunting the narrative, okay? Now, since the Irminsul tree has been burned, we need to talk about fate. What happens now that fate doesn't seem to exist? Irminsul was the method through which the heavenly principles maintained fate, but now the Irminsul has been destroyed. Nahida says that the flow of fate now carries many more possibilities. But the quest doesn't say that fate is completely gone. It doesn't say that prophecies no longer matter either. And it doesn't say that every possible future can suddenly happen. What it does confirm is that there are now more possibilities in the flow of fate than there were before. Meaning Teyvat's future is no longer fixed on one path or completely predetermined. Prophecies may have more room to change. Characters may have a greater chance of escaping outcomes that once seemed unavoidable. And most importantly, the heavenly principles may have lost one of their most important tools for maintaining control. This also connects to what Alice previously said about the Abyss. Alice described the Abyss in relation to the hatred of fates that will not come to pass, futures that are rejected and never became reality. Now that Irminsul has been destroyed and more possibilities can apparently move forward, it raises an important question. What happens to the Abyss now that this fate system has changed? We don't know the answer yet, and we don't know whether this change weakens the Abyss, strengthens it, or creates a completely new problem. So for now, this is theory. But what then will be Snezhnaya's story now that the heavenly principles no longer seemingly controls fate? The Tsaritsa has set her gaze on the heavenly principles. The God's Limits teaser heavily implies that the Fatui's end goal involves challenging and possibly killing the heavenly principles and their shades. When the heavenly principles eventually does wake up, they may find that Irminsul has been destroyed and replaced by Aru, and also that the Hydro Throne was destroyed. This may give humanity more independence, but Aru and Nahida might also be a future target. The artifact set Disenchantment in Deep Shadow adds more context to Snezhnaya's potential story. The lore in the artifact set takes place before the current Tsaritsa ascended the throne in Zepelyarny Palace. At that time, Snezhnaya was ruled by the Snow King, and a human researcher named Axinia was involved in a forbidden project approved by him. Their project involved searching for a path beyond the heavens, described as a stairway leading to a vacant seat in the Court of the Stars. The story also connects their work to forcing unlikely possibilities into reality, which suggests they were already interested in resisting or manipulating fate. With everything that happened in Acts 9 and 10, the Tsaritsa's plan should be easier to execute now more than ever, right? If fate is unpredictable right now, and the heavenly principles no longer has the same control it once had through Irminsul, then could someone else step in and seize control of Teyvat's future? But what if destroying Irminsul didn't free Teyvat from fate? What if it only created an opening for someone else to impose their own? Now I want to talk about one of the strangest mysteries Nahida leaves the Traveler with before Irminsul burned down. Before everything is destroyed, Nahida seems to pull one final piece of important information from Irminsul. She tells the Traveler, the statues of the gods hang inverted from the heavens, but one alone is unique among them. Then she secretly gives the Traveler the location of this unique statue and instructs them not to tell anyone. And for the rest of Acts 9 and 10, we never get a follow-up. Now, I'm sure a lot of us immediately thought of the defiled statue from We Will Be Reunited, and I do think that's intentional. The game clearly wants us to remember the inverted statue of the Seven, and this isn't the only Archon quest that we're reminded of it. But I also don't think Nahida is talking about that same statue. The defiled statue was a stolen statue of Barbados that the Abyss Order corrupted and suspended upside down in the ruins. They planned to use it as part of their Loom of Fate operation. But the Traveler has already seen that statue, meaning they already know where it is. So if Nahida were only talking about the defiled statue, why would she need to secretly give the Traveler its location? And why would she warn them not to tell anyone? I think Nahida's statement is probably setting up a much bigger secret about the statues of the Seven, Celestia, or even the true structure of Teyvat itself. Upside down Teyvat theory is still a thing. I also think Nahida is pointing us toward a hidden statue we've never seen before. And we already have a reason to believe special statues can lead somewhere important. A statue of Barbados was a portal to the Temple of Space. So what if this unique statue does something similar? What if it leads a Traveler to another hidden location that no one in Teyvat is supposed to know about? Remember the massive Barbados statue in Mondstadt? Now, I'm not saying this is the statue Nahida is talking about, but the inscription reads Gateway of Celestia. Just something to think about. If you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm your leafy lore keeper Minsleif, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to.